Well, nothing about the party political divide on The Voice really changes the way independent crossbenchers will campaign. Teal independent Kate Chaney, the member for Curtin, joined us a short time ago from Perth. Kate Chaney, welcome back to the program, this time from afar. It's a matter of record, isn't it, that your seat until last year was ultra-safe Liberal, and even if voters voted for you, I imagine their values didn't change a lot if they were previously Liberal voters. So in that context, how do you judge the mood of the electorate in Curtin on the question of The Voice?
Greg, I had a community event last night, as it happens, and The Voice was one of the topics that came up in the discussion of a lot of different topics. And generally, I think there is still broad support on The Voice. And there was, I would describe the mood as disappointment last night about the stance that the Liberal Party has taken on The Voice. There is still a fair bit of misinformation out there, but broadly, I think it's a reasonably socially progressive electorate, and there is still quite broad support on The Voice.
Is it misinformation? Can you just sort of break that up for us? Is it misinformation? Is it a lack of understanding or a lack of information that is factual? What is it that you think causes confusion or ambivalence in the mind of voters?
I think some factual information can just set the record straight on a few things. And part of that is understanding what sorts of things belong in the Constitution and what sorts of things don't. And our Constitution is a place for principles. And for example, we say in the Constitution that we have a High Court. We don't go into all the details of how the High Court operates. And that's why it is appropriate to put the principle in there, and then to deal with a lot of the detail of how those people will be elected, how it will work in legislation. So I think that we've still got 6 months between now and when the referendum will be held, and people still will have an opportunity to understand, how that works, and what should be in there, and what we need to retain some flexibility on.
I guess it's easy at one level to just breezily dismiss the effect of the Liberal Party Room's decision under Peter Dutton yesterday to vote no, or campaign against more precisely. But surely a loss of bipartisanship is going to make it somewhat more difficult. Would you agree? Even locally, where you are, you're going to have Liberal MPs in the neighbouring seat of Moore, further south in Forest and Canning, running around at some level campaigning against it, doesn't it? Do you acknowledge it makes it more difficult?
I definitely do acknowledge that it makes it more difficult, and I think it is a real shame. And I also think that the Liberal Party in the long term will regret this decision. The Liberal Party talks about wanting to unify the country, but I think that we're getting some very mixed messages, and I don't think it helps at all. So it will make the challenge greater. But I come back to the idea that the Uluru Statement, which was developed after a long period of consultation with a large number of Indigenous people involved, was an invitation and an offer to the Australian people, not to the politicians. And ultimately, it will be the people who decide whether to accept that modest ask and that invitation to change the way that we move forward.
Talking about the Liberals as you just were, Kate, your words seem to resonate a little with those of your uncle, Fred Chaney, who earlier this month warned ahead of the decision that was made ultimately yesterday, that the Liberal Party was at risk of, quote, spoiling its own legacy by opposing The Voice. What's your own assessment of what damage is done to that legacy, or what that legacy is now?
Yeah, well, I do happen to think he's quite a wise man, and I agree with that. I think it makes it very difficult for the remaining moderates in the Liberal Party, who are now put in this position between the the Conservative official position of the party and actually listening to their communities and acting on their consciences. And we've seen Bridget Archer come out. There will be others as well. And I don't think it does the Liberal legacy much good at all. And I certainly think in electorates like mine, it will make it increasingly challenging for the Liberal Party to send a message that they are listening and that they do actually represent the inclusive values of communities like mine.
All right, well, let's bring it back to what you will actually do. How actively will you be campaigning in Curtin or even in surrounding areas, Kate Chaney? Will you be spending your own money? Will you be calling more of these town hall meetings? What does campaigning look like to you?
So I definitely will be campaigning, and I've worked in Aboriginal affairs in a few different roles over the last 20 years and strongly believe that this is a necessary part of changing the future. So I will, and I was consistent about that throughout my election campaign as well. I'll hold a series of events, but I think it's really important that this is driven by people, not politicians. So I'll hold those events, but I will also be working with community groups across Curtin to support them in their needs, because we don't want it to come down to a partisan decision. And I think people are sick to death of partisan politics. Yeah. So really, people all over Australia have permission to get involved in this. So I'll be supporting things like the kitchen table conversation movement with the Together Yes campaign to get everyone to be involved and be part of that, not just politicians.
Yeah, of course, there are obvious limits to the persuasive ability of professional politicians to make a difference in this, I guess, with 18 million voters. But we started talking, Kate Chaney, about the local sort of mood within Curtin. What do you think of broader WA, which you know very, very well from your previous occupations? News poll yesterday had it extremely line ball at 51% for. Is it a knife's edge state on the voice question, do you think?
I think there is definitely more work to be done. I'm confident that as people understand more about what it is and what it isn't, and as some of those fear campaigns can be countered, that will shift, and Western Australia will ultimately acknowledge that we need to do things differently in this space. And this it won't fix everything, but I think it's a precondition to intergenerational change and making sure that in 20 years we're not in the same position that we are, saying we've tried lots of different things and it just doesn't work. Yeah. We're not seeing the closing of the gap. So I think with the time that we've got left and with the good faith engagement of people and open minds to understand the facts, we will see a yes vote in Western Australia. Well,
that time left is about 6 months, and I'm sure we'll be talking between referendum voting day and today once more. Kate Chaney, enjoy your Easter break, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks very much, Greg.